Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. I know it has been a minute since I've released some refreshing content, but trust me, it has been worth the wait as today's episode is an absolute banger as I will be fixing every problem I have with college football. I would like to preface this by saying, as Josh Pate has recently said, I'm not happy with everything going on in college football, but I still love the freaking sport. And I am inclined to feel the exact same way as him here. With that being said, in the video, I will be undertaking the heavy burden of making college football great as it once was and making it better. And all of this will be done as realistic as possible. So I'm not abolishing the transfer portal. I'm not doing anything drastic like that, but making all these changes as realistic as possible. With all this being said, let's just dive right into the first topic: recruiting and transfer portal regulations. I want to preface this segment by saying that I think under the current system and the system that I will be presenting here in a couple short moments, that tampering is really unacceptable. It has become far too commonplace in today's college football and it needs to stop. So politely, please stop tampering. And under the current system, I think that there should be major fines and penalties if you're caught. I don't care that everyone's doing it. If you're caught, you shouldn't do it. And there should be a punishment for it. And I think once we get an actual governing body in, I feel like that would be extremely beneficial to cracking down on tampering as well. Okay, so now we are getting into the meat of the argument here. I want to start by saying that I'm bringing the word commitment back. What does the word commitment mean in college football terms? It means that you are going to be at said program for 3 to 4 years, put your heart and soul into the program. Yes, you may not start your first year or even your second year, but you are going to get that chance. You are going to be invested in the program. The program will invest in you in return. And that's really what the word commitment means. It's been lost today. I mean, you have commitment, flip, 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 sign, flip, transfer, play a year, transfer, transfer, NFL. That's really what we have, and it's terrible, and I hate it. A player can rack up like 7 to 8 jerseys just by flipping and transferring and all this stuff. We really should have a prospect commit to one school and play at that one school. That's not the ideal scenario. We don't always have that. I get it. We will talk about the transfer portal in a minute. Just hear me out. Okay, so the first point here that I would like to make is a prospect cannot fully commit to his school until said player is at least 16 years old and preferably wait till 17. A lot of you would be saying, "Oh yeah, no, this should be commonplace. Isn't everyone doing that?" No, there are a good amount of high school freshmen Okay, so now let's talk about the portal. So, like we said earlier, at least 2 years at the program of commitment. So, the earliest a player could transfer is after their sophomore year or after their, their sophomore year. And then past that, no more than 2 times transferring, including grad transfers. So, let's take, for example, a player who has their 5th year, they're going into their grad school. So they transferred after their sophomore year, and then they transfer for their grad school and they, play football. So this would make sure that the most amount of teams a player could play for would be 3. And we want to get that at 1 or 2. And 3 would be a extraordinary circumstance and not commonplace like it is right now. Excuse me. And the portal, the last thing that we have here, will open the day after the national championship and will remain open for 2 weeks only. Now, that will be 14 full days, by the way. So only one portal cycle. And I can see a lot of you guys in the comments right now because this has come up that what happens when coaches decide to get fired, or, well, not decide, when coaches are fired, in the middle of February, what happens to those players? Why can't they transfer? This is because I haven't put this in here, but I would be putting in a cycle where coaches have to be either, they either stay with their program or they get fired or they leave, and that would be right before the national championship, and then they would have to find a coach by the end of the portal cycle. So, you can spend your time finding a coach in the portal cycle. You just won't be able to reap the benefits of the portal. Um, so this gets rid of coaches leaving in the middle of February, getting fired in the middle of February, and then they're just left out to dry. No, it would happen mostly in December. So we'd have the coaching carousel cycle, and then we would have the portal cycle, all while the playoffs and the national championship will be taking place in bowl season as well. I think that while these aren't major changes to the portal, I think that these changes can really help facilitate the transfer portal and have it so that we don't have 1,800 million kids in the portal at the same time. And what I see are players that, were 3, 4, 5-star, really not the 5-star guys, but mostly the 4-star guys out of high school who didn't get immediate playing time, who are now going to FCS schools and some of them D2 schools that, because they just wanted to jump ship because they're not getting playing time. And now, yeah, sure, they're going to be getting playing time for a extremely less school, and they're not going to get really a lot of development, and their chances at a career in the NFL are over. So I really think that we have to limit players to 2 years at the program of commitment. We now move on to a completely different topic that would be postseason reform. I will now start with the playoff and then go to bowl season. The playoff in my system would go from 12 teams to 6 teams. That is probably one of the bigger changes that I will make, that I would make if I was fixing college football. Now, I think the biggest one will be when we talk about conference realignment and scheduling realignment. I think that would alter the course of how college football is going, and I think it would go for the better as well. But I think this is also for the better as well. The playoff will go from 12 to 6 teams. There will be 2, I say play-in games, but they're really playoff games. And this is all based off of the AP top 6 teams in the country. So number 4 would play number 5 in the AP top 6, and then number 3 and number 6 would play. You'd reseed, and then the winners of those games would play the number 1 and number 2 teams, and then from there you have a 4-team playoff. So you have here on the right of your screen a example that I've drawn up for this scenario. And by the way, the national championship will be played at the Rose Bowl, and the group of 5 will hold its own playoff. I'll explain why here in a second, but excuse me. So the number 4 team in college football last year was Penn State. The number 5 team last year in college football was Notre Dame. Both of those teams would play, and first you'd have them play, and then you have the number 3 team, Texas, play the number 6 team, Ohio State. Yes, Ohio State was the eighth the 8th seed in the 12-team playoff, but according to the AP poll, well, I think it was the college football playoff poll that I took this from, the college football playoff poll, they were the 6th best team in college football, which I think they were right there anyway. So they would play Texas. Let's just say it plays out how it played out in the actual playoff this year, where Notre Dame wins and Ohio State wins. So Oregon would play Ohio State because of reseeding purposes, and then Notre Dame would play Georgia, and then if we're playing it how the actual games played out, Ohio State would play Notre Dame and then win. But let's say, Penn State wins and Texas wins. Let's say in alternate universe, Penn State would play Oregon, Georgia would play Texas. Winners of those games would play each other in the national championship game. One more scenario. Let's say Ohio State wins and Penn State wins. Ohio State would play Oregon and Penn State would play Georgia. Winners of those games would play in the national championship game. I feel like this is a really good system. As you can already see, we already have all the teams that were in the top 6 anyway. All the teams, all the other 6 teams in the 12-team playoff were gone by this stage in the 12-team playoff. So I think that it is a really good system that I think can work. And you might be asking why. I like the 12-team playoff. I like having more teams. I really don't like this argument because of the fact that 12 teams are not capable of winning a national championship. If you get it, you get it. But if you don't, by that I mean 12 teams are not capable of beating multiple elite teams to win the national championship. That is not to say that there are not teams capable of doing it. There's at least one every year that does it. And some years you can see that there are a couple of teams that are able to, win multiple top tier games. And I mean top tier. I don't mean Boise State. I don't mean Tennessee. Well, if we're taking last year as an example, I don't mean Indiana. I mean elite teams. Elite teams from last year were Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas. Those were probably the elite teams. And you can even say that Penn State was a fringe. You could even say that Georgia was a fringe elite team without Carson Beck. So I propose 6 teams because 6 teams is probably the most amount of elite teams you're going to have in a year. You're probably not going to have more than 6 elite teams. The top 6. No auto bids, no conference kumbaya, just the top 6 best teams play. Like I said, 6 plays 3, 5 plays 4, winners reseed and play 1 and 2. And this is according to the college football playoff poll. And yeah, so I think that this is a really good system. The group of 5, I think, is so this is the reason why I think that they should have their own playoff. They are so far out from where the actual top teams are. If you take the top teams from the actual Power 4 and the top teams in the group of 5, the top teams in the Power 4 are beating them by many scores every time. I mean, we saw that with Penn State and Boise State. Boise State held up a little bit of a fight, but Penn State trounced them. And Penn State is probably the 5th or 6th best team in this from last year. They I think definitely were probably the worst team out of these 6 teams that I have up on your screen. Let's be honest. And they were a really good team, don't get me wrong, and I think that they'll be even better next year. But Boise State by far was the best team out of the group of 5. They were carrying. The next team up was miles worse than Boise State. So I think because of this, and then when you go to the middle of the pack, oh my goodness, the middle of the pack of the group of 5 is basically just FCS for not even the elite teams, but just the pretty good teams in the group of 4. Well, in the Power 4. Excuse me, getting my words mixed up here a little bit, but I think you guys know what I mean by this. The group of 5, I think, is closer to the FCS than the Power 4. And I think that that's blatantly true. Obviously, you have some exceptions in there, like Boise State. I get that. But I think that the group of 5 should hold its own playoff, and they will have to take on some FCS teams because teaser, in my new conference realignment, some of the group of 5 teams will be moving up to the Power 4 level. You're going to have to wait and see that because we will talk about the bowl games and the NIL regulations and reform that I would have, and then we will move to that. So please stick around. It is just getting good right now. Okay, I promise to make this segment short, but to really I think that bowl season is a wonderful thing in college football. It's what sets it apart really from a lot of the other sports. It's why a lot of people love college football, and bowl season has been watered down severely. So I think that I would make a couple changes. The first one would be the minimum total wins to get in a to a bowl game will be 7. It's not 6 anymore. You have to have a winning record. Have to have a winning record to get there. There are too many teams. There are way too many teams that can be invited to go to a bowl game. You actually have to earn the right to go to a bowl game. That's how it used to be, and I think that that's how it should be. And teams, what I didn't put in here is that teams that have a easy schedule by scheduling standards, you should have 8 wins, not 7. And then here's the next point: players who do not have a legitimate reason to opt out of bowl games must play. You can't just opt out because you think you're so entitled that, because you're going to go in the 4th or the 5th round of the NFL draft, you can't you stub your toe. You can't do anything because that'll hurt your draft stock. If anything, it's going to help your draft stock. If you are legitimately hurt or, sick or anything like that, yes, that would be a legitimate reason. But a legitimate reason is not because you think you're going to stub your toe and, you know, do all this stuff. I think what everyone points to is Matt Corral in what was that, like 2021, I think. Matt Corral played in his bowl game when really no one was playing, and he ended up tearing something or the other, and his draft stock went down because he couldn't play at the combine. He couldn't do any of that stuff. And I think he went 6th round to the Panthers. Didn't really pan out there. But really, everyone's scared of that. But that really doesn't happen at all. That's a once that is like really a one-time thing. And then bowl games, I think, should have more lucrative prizes for winners up to or including bonuses for NIL collectives straight from the bowl entity. And then bonuses for coaches and players directly. I think that there should be way more of a lucrative aspect to winning the bowl game. And I think that it really, really, realistically, these things could happen. And I think that it would make bowl season a lot more fun. And also, getting rid of some of the irrelevant bowl games and making much more exciting matchups with moving the total wins to 7 and 8 and for the star players to actually play. And you saw a little bit of that last year. Illinois versus South Carolina was a really fun game to watch because really no one opted out except for the South Carolina running back. His name escapes me right now, but I think that really that game was really fun, and we can have that game 10 times over, 20 times over. We can have 20 games that are really exciting between teams that never play each other. And I think that it's very realistic and definitely could happen. And I hope that will happen. And these are my changes that I would make. So now we have NIL reform or regulation, whichever one you want to call it. I'm really not an expert in this scenario in this field. I'm giving my best stab at it, but I think what we're heading to is a lot better than where we're at. So what I have here is the total earnings from TV, basically radio, sponsorships, all that, are distributed evenly to all conferences in all sports. These earnings go straight to the conferences, like I said. So basically, everything TV has to offer. I have the big TV network logos up there. Everything the TV rights and everything has to offer goes straight to the conferences across all sports, not just football, baseball, basketball, softball, all across all sports. And those earnings go straight to the conferences, and then the conferences choose how to distribute evenly. If Ohio State is bringing in a lot more money than Northwestern in the Big Ten, they should have a bit more money than Northwestern. But that is not to say that Northwestern shouldn't get anything. But the conferences choose how to distribute evenly. Now, within those conferences, do you have just a commissioner, or do you have a round table of a representative from each school? Or I don't know. I don't know really any of those um, details, but I think that we really need to have something like this. And then that money, when it's distributed by the conferences to the individual schools, they can do whatever they want with that money. If they want to go out and get the best players from the transfer portal, but it uses all their money that they earned from there, then they can choose to do that. If they want to build a new athletic facility with what those people have, they can do that. If they want to make repairs on their basketball court, they can go do that. It's up to the schools to do whatever they want because it's money that they have received through every single sport, if that makes sense. And then as we continue here, the collectives have a cap, bonuses notwithstanding. So you can only collect up to so much money. Now, what that figure could be, you can tell me in the comments. Should it be 15 million, 20 million? Should it be 10 million? Should they not get as much money because they're already getting, all this money from the networks and all this stuff? So you can tell me in the comments what that cap should be. But I think that it's collectives should stay here, but in a more simplified manner, and collectives can only be used for the sports and all this other stuff. So, and then the last comment I have here: third party pure NIL should continue as normal. If a player wants to be sponsored by a plumbing unit, that should be fine. Everything like that should be fine to do. And that's really what NIL should be. But, these are realistic changes. If I were to change it, and really, I think that this is a video that I could and should make. If I were to redo everything in college football, I would just have NIL be third party, pure, sponsorships, third party stuff. But, that notwithstanding, we will now finish this video with probably the most important segment, the segment that you guys probably clicked on to for, and that would be the conference realignment that I have. Okay, so we will be going through every single Power 4 conference with all the changes that I would make. Now, my idea is based off of a previous idea that I've had that I've made into a video on the channel. I might even make a separate video on this topic explaining it more. But what you need to know is that I put every single conference to 20 teams and put them all and then put all of them, divide them up into 4 different divisions. And I will explain how playoffs and and conference championships. I will explain how it all works after we go through every single conference. So in the Big Ten, you have the 4 divisions: the East Division, the Central Division, the Midwest, and the West Division. And the 2 teams that I added are Notre Dame and Washington State. Now, I do think a move to the Big Ten will happen for Notre Dame. A lot of you guys would be saying, why Washington State? Well, first of all, because of the Big Ten's geographical expansion and their willingness to grow in different markets. We've already seen this already, but by adding Washington State to the Big Ten, it would further the conference's footprint in the Pacific Northwest. They already seem to have a monopoly on there. They could monopolize the whole Midwest and the whole coast of and the whole West Coast by adding Washington State. And also, it does fit with the geographical way that I have this set up. I really do. I really do love the regionality of the sport. And I think that part of a big reason why I have these divisions set up instead of 2 big divisions or 1 big just conference. I really hate the idea of just having everyone in one conference because it starts to get you start to get rid of the regionality of it. I mean, the Big Ten's already gotten kind of rid of their regionality. I kind of bring it back, with divisions such as the Central, the Midwest, the East, and the West. I mean, we have regionality in these divisions, and I'll explain to you guys how they play as soon as we're done going through all these teams. Another reason why Washington State could be a great fit in the Big Ten would be, their academic and cultural fit. The Big Ten really both they pride themselves on both their academics and their athletics, and I think Washington State has a really big commitment to both fields. And I think, they would be a really good team this upcoming year if they didn't lose guys like John Mater or other wide receivers that they lost. But I think if you put them in the Big Ten, they would be more hunters than being hunted. And then I think that, like I said, Notre Dame is going to end up in the Big Ten at some point in time. And I think that they should join a conference, and I think that that conference will be the Big Ten. I mean, you already have rivals in there like Indiana and Purdue. Some say, Illinois, Wisconsin. You have teams in there that have a storied, even Nebraska, Ohio State definitely is in there, that have a um, that have history together with Notre Dame. And I think this is a very good regional way of realigning the Big Ten Conference. Here now is a map of what it looks like in the Big Ten. Yes, I drew those lines, so please forgive me. But, like we said, bringing back the regional aspect to the Big Ten. In the East, you have Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, and Maryland. Then in the Midwest, you have, well, Central, you have the Michigan State Spartans, Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, and Notre Dame. And then in the Midwest, over here, you have Nebraska, Iowa, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And then in the Pacific, you have those 5 Pacific teams. And I will have one of these maps for every single conference. So let's now dive into the SEC. And now this is the conference that most of you guys want to see, the SEC, how I realigned the SEC. So we have 4 divisions, like I said, the Coastal, the Deep South, the Mid-South, and the South Midwest. You could really call this one the Midwest. But starting in the coastal side, you have Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and then 2 additions that I made. That would be North Carolina and Virginia. I will explain all of these after we go through these four divisions. In the Deep South, I have Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn. So really covering the states of Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. Now the Mid South have a conglomerate of teams here: Missouri, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Tennessee. All teams that have stayed with the SEC and will continue to stay with the SEC, I think. And you can see really the regional aspect of all of these. And then the South Midwest, really the Midwest would be Texas, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma, who are all in the SEC now. And then 2 additions, SMU and Kansas. A lot of you are shaking your head on the Virginia and Kansas ones. I will explain. So let's start out with let's start out with Coastal and talk about North Carolina here. North Carolina, adding them would enhance, regional rivalries and their recruiting power. If you add a team like North Carolina to the SEC, it would create some exciting rivalries. You have teams like Georgia that they would play every year, South Carolina. You have a North Carolina, South Carolina rivalry right there, ready to go. And, they've been a strong football brand, and they will continue to be. They will, I think, be a powerhouse with the investment that Bill Belichick is bringing to the North Carolina team. He's bringing in a boatload of money. He's bringing in a boatload of support and a boatload of investment, and that is what the SEC loves. The SEC loves it when their teams are fully invested in football. And I think that it would create more of an academic balance because, especially when it comes to Virginia as well, they're bringing a little bit of investment when it comes to the academics, and that's something that the SEC doesn't necessarily have. So not saying that they don't have any academics at all. That's far from true. But in comparison to the Big Ten, who consider themselves scholars, and the SEC folk not so much, I think that this would kind of level that field a little bit more. So I think that you can regurgitate word for word what I just said about North Carolina for Virginia. But also with Virginia, you're expanding more toward the north and getting more of that Virginia market. Virginia is a place where there is legitimate reasons. There are legitimate resources in Virginia, and there's a big market in Virginia for college football, and it's a lot of it's untapped because they're in the ACC, most of them, or in the group of 5. So I think that there's a lot of resources that can be tapped when it comes to Virginia. And I think that Virginia, like we said, strong academic reputation. They have a very strategic geographical location, being on the East Coast, being in Virginia, and they do have a competitive football team as well. And I think that could really Virginia might be the one that people complain about most in the comments. I think I can stand by it. I think that it would be a really good addition. Now we move over to the South Midwest where we have our other two teams. So, SEC 16 teams now. They'll be adding 4 teams. So the other 2 teams, SMU, I think would be a very good addition. They just went to the college football playoff. They just finished 11-2. So they are a growing football program and they're growing fast. They're not a very big school, but they have a lot of rich donors and they have been giving. And Rhett Lashley has been a really good football head coach, a really underrated one. He just talked with Josh Pate recently. I would encourage y'all to go listen to that. It was a really good interview, and I think that would be really good. And this would be a very strategic expansion into Texas. They already have a lot of Texas roots in the SEC, but what you would be getting is that Dallas-Fort Worth area, probably one of the largest and most influential sports markets in the country. By adding SMU, you just get all of it, really. And I think that would be very strategically wise if they could do that. And then you have the last one here, the Kansas Jayhawks. It would be expanding the SEC's reach into the Midwest, as we know, with teams like Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas State, Iowa State. There's a huge market untapped by the SEC that could be explored. And I think that the University of Kansas would help bring some of that Midwestern audience to the SEC. And and it's still pretty regional. I mean, you look at it on a map, Kansas is still pretty close. If they do have to travel to Florida, that's not that bad of a flight. That's not that bad of a regional outlook. And then you have the basketball and football synergy that you get there. You also get that with North Carolina, but especially with Kansas. Yes, the SEC is a very good conference in basketball right now. It could be the best one with the addition of Virginia, Kansas, and North Carolina, especially how volatile basketball is. Some of these teams in the SEC won't be good next year that are good this year, or vice versa. And you bring in some stable basketball teams here as well. I know we're talking about football, but I think that that's part of the reason why adding these teams would be good. Now, here's a map of what the SEC looks like in terms of its geographical locations. In the West division here, you have the 3 Texas teams and Oklahoma and Kansas. So you see that they have that Midwest um, regional aspect to it. Then over on the other side, you have the coastal schools. That would be Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. In the deep South, you have Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn, Alabama, and LSU. And then in the mid South, you have Vandy, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas. So I'm hoping that these visuals give you a little bit of perspective here on what we're looking at. And worked hard on these visuals. Yes, the lines are a little muddled. I did those myself. Yes, but really, this is what we're looking at here. So let's dive into the Big 12. Okay, so now we move into the Big 12. Here we have the 4 divisions: Midwest, Central, Eastern, and Western. In the Midwest division, you have Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, North Dakota State. That's a big one that they add, and Texas Tech. In the Central division, they have Colorado, BYU, TCU, Baylor, and Houston. In the Eastern division, you have West Virginia, new additions Marshall and Army, as well as UCF and Cincinnati. In the Western Division, you have Arizona, Arizona State, new additions Boise State and UNLV, and Utah. I think I have a couple good reasons for every single one of these moves. Number one, and North Dakota State moving to the Big 12. They obviously bring that winning tradition and championship pedigree. They're one of the most successful programs in FCS history, multiple national championships over the past decade. It would bring a competitive edge to the Big 12, this winning tradition. And I think that their success on the national stage, they played Colorado incredibly close. That looked like a Big 12 game. They have a really good opportunity here, and I think that the Big 12 should capitalize it. And market expansion into the Dakotas. And their program has been a source of stability and growth. If you want to win a national championship, you go to obviously Alabama, you go to Texas, you go to Ohio State, and you go to it used to be JMU in in the FCS and North Dakota State. If you want to win a championship, you go to these places because they will win national championships while you're there. So I think that that's a pretty compelling case why North Dakota State could and should join the Big 12. In the Eastern Division here, you have Marshall. Marshall's a very interesting one. They have a strong football tradition, multiple Conference USA championships, a history of success, notable bowl game appearances. They have a reputation for being a really tough team. It would elevate, and it's not that the Big 12 is bringing these subpar schools. These subpar schools are bringing up their game by going to the Big 12, and I think that that's a really interesting thing when you think about Marshall. Is that yeah, they might be Marshall right now, but when they move to the Big 12, they could become something more, especially with these rich football roots. And this also brings a rivalry between them and West Virginia, as they both are located in West Virginia. And then you have Army. Army has been really good these past couple years. They're an air raid type of offense. That's exactly what the Big 12 looks like. It's really fun football. It's really fun to watch. And, they've beaten some really good teams. They just beat Oklahoma, an SEC team, in a bowl game. They have, a historic football tradition. This would be more media appeal. You get to put Army in your conference, put them on a national stage. They attract eyeballs. Don't put it any two ways. They attract eyeballs to their play. I mean, if nothing else, there are a lot of people that have been through the Army. There have been a lot of people that have gone through that college, and people ride and die with their service academies. So so I think that it would be a really fun addition there as well. And then you have Boise State over in the Western Division in here. I think that that's really it really should happen. I mean, they're proven to have good football success, and you have more outreach there into that Midwest type, into that Mountain West type of thing, and they do have a strong recruiting base, and they have really good program stability there. I think that they are top 10 in returning production this year. And they're, everyone looks at Ashton Jeanty, but I mean, look what they did. They steamrolled everyone. They looked like a team ready to make the move up to a Power 4 level. And I think they will in real life. And I think that is a logical destination for them in the Big 12. UNLV, maybe not so much of a clear-cut thing here, but this does give expansion into the Las Vegas market. Las Vegas, has a ton of people in there in it. If you bring UNLV up to a bigger podium, I think more people will listen. I think more people will be engaged. And I think that there's a lot of revenue potential here, obviously located in Las Vegas. I think that's one of the main things here, and I think that they have a pretty good football program on their hands. They have had one for a while now. So I know it can get kind of confusing on how this looks with all these new teams. So here is a visual that I have made up here. The Western Division, obviously including UNLV, Utah, Boise State, and then both Arizona schools. The Central Division making up of BYU, Colorado, TCU, Houston, and Baylor. The Midwest Division, kind of that Midwest Belt division as you go straight up from Texas Tech to Oklahoma State to Kansas and Iowa State, and then North Dakota State. And then the Eastern Division was pretty easy to make out, I'm not going to lie. Just the 5 teams in the Eastern Division. That would be Army, West Virginia, Marshall, Cincinnati, and UCF. Okay, so I know that we are just past the 40-minute mark in this video. I told you guys that this would be a big video. I was not lying. This video will probably go past the 50-minute mark as well, but stay with me. This video is almost over after this, and I will explain how scheduling works. So in the ACC here, we have the Coastal Division, Central, North, and South Division. In the Coastal Division, you have Clemson, New Edition JMU, Virginia Tech, Duke, and New Edition East Carolina, ECU. In the Central Division, you have Louisville, NC State, Wake Forest, New Edition Liberty, and New Edition Memphis. In the North, you have Pitt, Boston College, Syracuse, New Edition Navy, and UConn, also another New Edition there. In the South, you have Florida State, Miami, Tulane, and UCF. Tulane and UCF being the New Editions, and Georgia Tech. Okay, so now I will give a couple reasons for each of these moves. JMU, for JMU to come in here, they have absolutely, they're just like North Dakota State, very strong football success recently. I mean, they've won a ton of championships at the FCS level. They recently came up to the Group of Five level. They dominated the first 2 years they were in. A geographical location fit. They're in Harrisburg, Virginia, really the heart of the ACC's footprint. I mean, we're going to see on the map in just a minute. They're really right in the middle of everything. And then you also have some rivalries right there with schools like Virginia Tech and Liberty. Okay, so now we have Memphis. Memphis would be interesting. A lot of you guys don't know about Memphis either. I didn't until I did my research. I think that they would be a great geographical fit. Being in the state of Tennessee, I think that they could develop rivalries with schools like, you know, Louisville, North Carolina State. That would be NC State. A school like JMU, I think would be a really good rivalry there as well. We will be talking about rivalries here at the end of the video very soon, and they have a really good basketball program as well. So that would be some good synergy there with the basketball and football um, complex there. Then you have Liberty. Liberty has the best group of five facilities by far. They look like they belong in a. So you're going to see this with, I think there's three programs. That number one, it would be Boise State, and then number two, Liberty, and then number three, Tulane. These three schools that really do need to make a jump up to the Power Four level because they have the facilities and the football prowess to be there. We'll talk about Tulane in a minute, but Liberty, best facilities by far. They have better facilities than most Power Four schools, and they've built a strong football program, and I think that they are an academic fit as well as they are a really academically driven school as well. And then you move on to Navy here over in the North Division. Navy has a very rich football tradition. Like we said, with the other service academy and Army, it would attract a lot of eyeballs, and I think that it would be a cultural fit there as well. With UConn, obviously the very strong basketball program really carrying why they would be in the ACC. But, their football team, they have a ton of potential for growth within the ACC, and I think that the ACC would provide the program the necessary to support to grow. I think that's the thing with a lot of these things, with a lot of these teams like UConn, Memphis, East Carolina, these schools that really they're not getting any help from their conferences, and I think that the ACC would really help to bolster these guys' football programs. In the South Division, you have Tulane. Now, obviously, Tulane, very strong football program, very much a recent success. A lot of recent success. I think that it would be more of a cultural fit as well, and I think that they are just a no-brainer. And then USF, University of South Florida, you could immediately develop that rivalry there with Miami, although Miami might dominate that in the beginning. I think once they get some really good resources in there, also Florida State, you can really get, and moving up to the ACC, that's very impressive, and being in Florida, that's really impressive. So you get to tap into more of that, of those top tier recruits in Florida. So now we get to the map, and this is the final map section. I love maps. I love the whole video, but I love the maps part especially when I get a visual like this. So, and I made this myself. So in the North Division, you have Pitt, Navy, Syracuse, UConn, and Boston College. As you can see with all this, we're bringing a real regional aspect to this where everything has been lost, I feel like. Stanford and Cal were not meant to be in the ACC. They were never meant to be in the ACC. So, you know, throwing them out of there and bringing in some more coastal schools, I feel like have really helped, and I think would really help. And you already have some rivalries right there ready to get started. UConn and Boston College look like a really good rivalry in football. Pitt and Navy could become really something there. And then the coastal part, that would be Virginia Tech and JMU are right there in state rivalry. East Carolina and Duke and Clemson. Duke and Clemson already have a little something going. So, I think that would be good. The Southern Division being Georgia Tech, Miami, FSU, and FSU and USF, and then Tulane as well. So you got some Florida schools in there. Tulane's already got some beef with some of those schools, and Georgia Tech as well. And then the Central Division, really not Central, but just the teams right there would be NC State, Wake Forest, Liberty, Memphis, and Louisville. So I think that this would be a really good setup for the ACC. Okay, so now this stuff gets here. So first you have 11 total games. You take off one game. You have 8 conference games and 3 non-cons, which will all be against Power 4 opponents, one per conference. So if you're a team in the ACC, you must play 3 non-cons from the Big 10, the SEC, and the Big 12. No exceptions. You cannot play an FCS team. You cannot play Group of 5. Well, actually, I'll say this really quick before we get started. The Group of 5, the rest of the Group of 5 and the FCS should merge. And that's when you have the Group of 5 playoff. You incorporate the FCS in that, all that. I'm hoping this is all clicking for you now, as it all clicked for me when I first came up with all of this. Then the 4 conference games, well, here's how you divide up the conference games. 4 of them will be in division teams. So if you notice, there's 5 divisions. There's 4 divisions of 5 teams. So you take one of those teams, Team X we'll call it, will play teams Y, Z, A, and B. So the 4 other teams in there, they will play them every single year. And then 3 of them will be against one team per the 3 divisions. So Team X from the South Division will play one team on a rotating axis every single year from the other 3 divisions. And then the last conference game will be against a set out of division team, as shown in the following slide. So I will go over every single. It'll take only a minute. I promise. It'll where I set every single rivalry that will be played every single year. So fear not. For those people that are worried about that rivalry or this rivalry, I have it covered. And then at the end of the season, the winners of each division have a mini 4-team playoff to become conference champion. And I think that that'll be very fun as well. So here are these set rivalries. This will be the last slide, the last little bit here before we end the video. So this is the conclusion here. So as you can see, a number of rivalries have been made, and these will be games that will be played every year. That this does not mean that, Florida will not play any of those other teams. Like we said, they will play at least every team once every 3 or 4 years on that rotating cycle. So I want to thank you guys as you look through all of these. And let me know how I did in the comments. Let me see if you would want to see a different one that would match up with the system that I have. I want to let you guys know that only 35% of you watching are subscribed. So I really want to let you guys know to please subscribe to the channel. It's how we keep everything free here. I don't do any ads. I don't do any of this. It's just straight football content all season long. I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. I have a ton of content planned out for the months of March and April. Top 25s, power rankings, the works, all of it, and other behind the scenes stuff that will be happening. It's all going on the channel. I know that the channel has been stagnant, not many views, but fear not, we have a ton of content that is going to be released very soon. So I really want you guys to subscribe. I want you guys to comment your thoughts down below. I gave you plenty of material to comment on. There's no reason for you to not comment if you are an intelligent football fan, which I really want you guys to subscribe if you are one. I want to build a great community of college football fans here on this channel. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.